My fusion system, fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapter 561, The world's tier has increased. The first planetary fortress in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Watson stood in mid-air. A thick black mist condensed around his body and rushed into the sky, turning into a death elemental magic source. Countless skeletons from all directions brought the same dense death aura into the sky. That process lasted for a few minutes. The death aura that covered the sun began to fade, and the sun returned to its radiant appearance. As the color of the sun returned to normal, the many magic elemental symbols in the sky also disappeared. The death elemental source vanished from the sky. At that moment, the sound of a system notification rang in Watson's ears. Congratulations, Master, for successfully fusing the 9th magical element. The current world's tier has increased. The world's tier has increased. What does that mean? Watson was stunned for a moment, then heard a voice again in his ear. The current world's tier has increased from Diamond to Starlight. Its power is currently at Starlight tier. At the same time, all the creatures in the world will receive an increased basic ability when they are born. How did you absorb my power of death and turn it into the world's new 9th magical element? Also, after I've advanced to Starlight tier, the power of heaven and earth constantly tried to repel me, but that force has disappeared. How did you do it? While Watson was thinking, Beta, sitting opposite him, spoke with a panicked expression. With a wave of his hand, Watson had created a death elemental magical course, causing the Holy Dragon Kingdom and even the entire world to change along with it. He had witnessed the scene of countless skeletons rising into the sky. He knew that it was something that he could not do even after advancing to the Starlight tier. He had let go of the evolution limits and even became the god of death's amalgamation while Watson was just an ordinary human. How could Watson do something that he could not do? However, that was fine. The repulsive force of heaven and earth had disappeared. Initially, that force had caused him a great deal of pain. Instead, it had disappeared, and it made him terrified. One would always be scared of the unknown. He did not know how it happened, but he was sure it had something to do with Watson. The repulsive force from heaven and earth has disappeared? So, that's what happened. Watson's eyes flashed, and he reached out to stroke his chin. Combined with the system notification, he understood what increment in the world's tier meant. The world was only a tiny fragment of ancient time's vast and boundless world. The battle between the gods had shattered that fragment. It was only at the diamond tier, so it could only withstand the power of a diamond tier elite. Still, since he had fused with the 9th element, the death element, that world had received much more magical support than before. It had become firmer, so it could withstand even greater power. Now that the world can already withstand the power of a Starlight tier elite, we won't have any problem even if the gods show up. The Dragon Kings I helped enhance will no longer have to endure the repulsive force. They will ascend eventually. Watson's heart was filled with joy. Initially, he had used the fusion system to help the Dragon Kings ascend, but they would leave that world within a year. So, he had no choice but to speed up his plans. Things were good then, the world had become stronger, and the Dragon Kings could continue living there. If he could use the fusion system to continue creating more magical sources, that world would very likely return to how it was in ancient times or even surpass it. The benefits of a rise in the world's tier were shown in an increase in strength and a lowered limit. Anything born after the increment, regardless of whether they had powerful bloodlines or not, would automatically have iron tier strength. If there were enough magic sources, ordinary people could even obtain platinum or diamond tier strength at birth, possessing talents comparable to the dragons. It seems like I need to fuse more magic sources to strengthen the world. That is beneficial to me and everyone else too. Watson turned his gaze to Beta, his eyes shining. Creating a brand new magic source was not a simple matter. He could not make it out of thin air unless there were excellent materials in front of him, such as Nidhogg, who had consumed so much water from the spring of life, and Beta, who had evolved into the god of death's amalgamation. Previously, he had treated the assassins sent by the Elven King as enemies that needed to be eliminated. He changed his mind, those people were treasures. Sensing Watson's gaze, Beta subconsciously shivered, and an intense threat rose in his heart. D*MN brat. I'll fight you to my death. Knowing that it would be difficult for him to leave that day, Beta gritted his teeth, and his body began to expand. The king's souls were all burning at the time, and the powerful force caused his body to expand like air. Not good. That guy is going to self-destruct. Many people who saw Beta's actions exclaimed. Beta was a Starlight tier elite, comparable to a god. They could only imagine the destruction if he were to destroy himself. The force might destroy the planetary fortress and any nearby area too. The people were a little panicked. At that moment, Watson reached out his hand toward Beta, who was about to self-destruct. Fusion system, activate. Beta, who had already expanded to a few hundred meters, turned into a ray of light. The souls of the dead emerged out of his body and turned into powerful energy in midair before it disappeared into the sky. Beta, who had lost those souls, immediately shrank, turning from a giant into a typical white-haired elf. Long live His Majesty, the Elven King. I have cleared a path for you with my life, and now I will destroy myself. Raising his hands high, Beta shouted excitedly. Halfway through his words, he felt like something was wrong. He lowered his head to look at his body and was stunned. The powers of the departed souls had disappeared, and even the power of death that he possessed had lessened. Watson had fused that power with the death elemental magic source. After killing more than 1,000 planetary fortress soldiers, I should not let you die so easily. Since you've brought me benefits, I've decided to give you a decent death. Goodbye, Elven Lord. Watson, who had cast the fusion system, extended his finger toward Beta and flicked it lightly. A dense death aura gushed from his finger, turning into a long dragon in midair that instantly washed over Beta's body. There were not even any dregs left of him. The world had turned black and white. The aura of death released by Watson was not weaker than the end of all things spell that Beta had used. Under that powerful force, Beta's body gradually collapsed. He opened his mouth, but he could not make a sound. In the end, he disappeared from the spot with panic in his eyes. That is impossible. Beta has already completely unlocked the limits of evolution. Why did he lose? Furthermore, he did not even have the ability to fight back. How strong was Watson? In the planetary fortress, Delta stared blankly at the sky. Beta, who had been killed by the power of death, could not be resurrected, even with the protection of the spring of life. Beta, who had been proud and mighty just moments before, had been easily killed in front of Watson. That made her feel like she was dreaming. It seems like I was right. Watson's power is much stronger than yours. Evolution is ultimately no match for fusion. You understand what I said, right? What do you think? Do you agree with my suggestion? King Landhar III sighed. Seeing that the elves were unmoved, he said, without my help, you would not even be able to withstand a single blow from Watson, just like that elf called Beta. Beta killed at least 1,000 dragons, but he lost to Watson after the great battle? How is that considered weak? One of the elves said. Planetary Fortress Army, resurrect. Just as the elf retorted, Watson's voice suddenly came from the sky. Watson patted his chest, and the silhouette of a chess piece that was sparkling with starlight appeared. Various giant dragons that were already dead appeared in midair, their bodies transforming back into their original form. That! The elf who had just spoken was utterly dumbfounded. The dead dragons were alive again. Furthermore, those dragons seemed to have been transformed from humans. King Landhar III shook his head. How foolish! Even at this point, you still can't let go of your pitiful self-esteem. Watson is much more powerful than you can imagine. Chapter 562, The New City Lord. Your Highness, we have disappointed you. After the resurrected planetary fortress soldiers came back to life, with Colette as the leader, they knelt on one knee toward Watson. They felt shameful. They had consumed the dragon transformation potion and transformed into diamond-tier dragons. They thought they would be able to display their skills in front of Watson and defeat the enemy, but who would have thought that Beta would wipe out their army? If it were not for Watson and the others, they would not have revived. It was not an exaggeration to say that even if Watson had given the potions to the pigs, it would not necessarily have a worse effect. They were professional soldiers, so how could they accept such a result? Their mentality had been inflated after consuming the potions because their strength had disappeared. All of you have disappointed me, indeed. Watson looked around and nodded. His words caused the expressions of the soldiers to become even gloomier. It's not because your strength is lacking, but because you have become dejected after failing once and even lost the courage to fight. So what if you failed? Failure is not a scary thing. There will always be stronger people in this world, no matter how strong you are. It will be fine as long as you work hard to become stronger to surpass the enemy. Are you afraid of failure? The soldiers looked at each other and shook their heads. We are not afraid. Do you have the ability to continue to become stronger? Right now, you are at the peak of your strength. Will you improve in the future? We will improve. The soldiers answered in unison again. That time, their voices were much louder and more orderly. Put away your despondent feelings and head to the planetary fortresses to begin training. If you want to avoid making mistakes, there is nothing more efficient than seizing every minute and second to train. No matter how strong you are still weak without a strong heart. The weak have no way to protect their family and friends in this world. You can only watch as enemies trample upon them. I hope my potion can create an invincible army that can defend the Holy Dragon Kingdom and not a bunch of trash who lose their fighting spirit once they fail. Yes, Your Highness. We will definitely not disappoint you. All the soldiers clenched their fists. Watson's voice was not loud, but it was powerful. It stimulated the fighting spirit in their hearts. They had lived a disorganized life in the fortress city. That was why they had lost so quickly when the elven army attacked. They had experienced the pain of losing their loved ones. They did not want to experience such a feeling again. Seeing the soldiers' faces lit up with confidence again, Watson nodded with satisfaction. He had deliberately said those words. Those soldiers must have been in ecstasy after they took the potions to transform into dragons. He had to let them know that they were still far from it. What Watson did not know was that the way he encouraged the army at that moment would make the future planetary fortress soldiers one of the most famous armies in the history of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. They would be famous throughout the world. After lecturing the soldiers, Watson rode on the wind elemental vortex and lightly landed back into the planetary fortress. He stood near the gate. Fox immediately walked up to him with a flattering smile on his face. Your Highness, you've worked hard. The battle was intense. Fortunately, you won. Your strength is truly unprecedented and unparalleled. It makes people sigh in admiration. Okay, stop flattering me. I remember we made a bet before the planetary fortress soldiers went to battle. Watson spoke indifferently and glanced at Fox. His words made Fox's heart thump, and his expression became stiff. He had hoped to make Watson happy, and he had forgotten about the bet. He did not expect Watson to remember it still. The bet was that if I won, you would do one thing for me unconditionally. Don't worry, it's nothing difficult. We've just formed an army for the planetary fortress, and I will need a staff to manage them. You will take up that position, and you will also be responsible for its subsequent expansion. Since you lost that bet to me, don't expect me to pay you for doing that. He patted Fox's shoulder and smiled amidst Fox's tearless response. Fox frowned, and his eyes were filled with regret. If he had known that was the result, he would have agreed to take the initiative before the bet, and he would not have lost his reward then. After hesitating for a moment, he suddenly thought of a problem. Your Highness, if I were to become a staff for the Planetary Fortress Army, then what would happen to my position as the City Lord? Don't worry about that. I already have a candidate for the new City Lord position. Watson clapped his hands. They heard footsteps. The officials walked, out one after another, along the streets. A young woman stood at the head of a group of dozens of officials. What's wrong with all of you? Who is that woman? Fox asked nervously, as he had a bad feeling in his heart. Hello, Lord Fox. My name is Dina. From now on, I will be the Lord of the First Planetary Fortress. The young woman was wearing a long black dress and a veiled hat that covered her beautiful face. At that moment, she bowed slightly and spoke slowly with a beautiful voice. When she spoke, the officials looked at her with passionate eyes. They whispered, Miss Dina's voice is so beautiful. I am so lucky to be able to see Miss Dina's face under the veil. It's much better to have Miss Dina as the City Lord than Fox. At least it doesn't hurt my eyes. The officials' comments made Fox's face turn red, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. A bunch of lustful people actually wanted a woman to be the City Lord because she was gorgeous and had a beautiful voice. That was too hasty. They even said that he was an eyesore. Was he really that ugly? He could not agree to that matter. Miss Dina, even if you are someone recommended by His Highness, you can't be the City Lord if you are not capable enough. Really? As Dina spoke, she lifted the veil on her face, revealing a beautiful face underneath. Her delicate expression, coupled with her slightly sorrowful voice, instantly stunned Fox. How could there be such a beautiful woman in the world? Fox felt like his blood was boiling, and his eyes were seeing stars. All he could see was Dina's face, and his ears were filled with her gentle and beautiful voice. Please, Lord Fox. I am very confident in my ability. If you don't believe me, then you can find some time to guide me after you give up this position. Dina took the opportunity to walk in front of Fox, raising her head, looking pitiful. Of course not. I am a person with principles. Fox took 2 steps away from Dina and coughed twice. Finding the time to guide you after giving up my position as the City Lord is not in line with the etiquette of a noble, so there is no need to find the time. I can tell you about the various affairs in the Planetary Fortress. Miss Dina, please follow me. Let's go. Dina was initially stunned by Fox's actions. At that moment, she covered her face with the veil again. Then, she left with Fox, who had been pretending to be righteous just a moment ago. He was bewitched by Dina's beauty and was acting even more ridiculous than before. Soon, those officials reacted and chased after her. Miss Dina, wait for us. Let us explain the city's matters to you. We are low-tier officials. We know more about the various industries in the city than Lord Fox. Chapter 563, Annual Development Plan of 10 million gold coins. At a meeting room in the City Lord's mansion, in the Planetary Fortress. Lady Dina, this is the annual report of the Fortress City's income. This year, the Fortress City has 200,000 gold coins in taxes, the finance officer said, sitting at the end of the meeting table in the meeting room with a smile. Half an hour had passed since Watson announced that Dina was the new City Lord. Many officials followed Dina to the meeting room, ready to listen to her arrangements. The Planetary Fortress was the original fortress city. It mainly dealt with border trades. All kinds of caravans would pass by there if they wanted to go to the south to make trades. The city would take a portion of the profits based on the value of the goods. Those caravans would occasionally seek help from the guards. It was a large sum of money. Compared to other cities near the Planetary Fortress, they earned a lot of money every year. Only 200,000 gold coins? It's just average. Dina sat at the head of the long table in the conference room, her slender fingers lightly tapping on the table. Her words wiped the smiles off the financial officer's face. They had 200,000 gold coins worth of taxes. He thought that Dina would be satisfied and praise his ability. He did not expect Dina to have such high standards. That's right. What's there to brag about 200,000 gold coins worth of taxes? Fox curled his lips and turned to give Dina a flattering smile, saying, previously, as the city lord, I was very dissatisfied with the city's annual profits. I have been working hard to increase the taxes. I wanted the fortress city to double its profits in 5 years and 10 times in 10 years. If it weren't for these officials not being able to keep up with my goals, we would have achieved that long ago. As Fox spoke with assurance, the officials curled their lips and rolled their eyes. They knew that Fox wanted to express his feelings in front of Dina, but his words were completely untrue. It would be more accurate to say that the biggest burden in the fortress city was him. After Fox became the city lord, he proposed a plan to increase the city's profits. His plan was to dig hot springs in the city so that merchants or foreign travelers could rest in the city. The project was good. In the end, after spending up to 100,000 gold coins, there were no hot springs in the city. There were only a few pools with foul water. After a group of officials in the city consulted the professionals, they found that the conditions for the formation of hot springs were very strict, and there were none in the fortress city. After that, Fox proposed another plan, to build a circus in the city with magical beasts as its selling point and attract people through clowns and the funny performances of magical beasts in the circus. It was a popular form of entertainment in the Dwarven Kingdom. The dwarves had many world-renowned performances, such as the Beautiful Dwarf and the Beast, the Seven Dwarves and the Beast Princess, and so on. After the plan was implemented, the circus people were invited to join them. As a result, the magical beasts from the Dwarven Kingdom were not acclimated to the soil and water in the fortress city, and more than half of them died before the show even started. The fortress city did not make any money on that project. Instead, it lost a lot of money. Fox had many similar activities. In terms of management, Fox was great, but unfortunately, he did not have the brains to make money. Thanks to the officials' ability, they helped to cover the ground so that the city would progress. After no one spoke up, Fox licked his dry lips and said, Lady Dina, I believe you understand my strength after hearing so much from me. I wonder what plans you have for that planetary fortress in the future. I can give you some advice. Is that so? Thank you very much, Lord Fox. I am new here, and there are many things that I don't understand. I don't know if I can do it without everyone's help. My plan for the planetary fortress is very simple. I don't know about the other planetary fortresses. At the very least, the first planetary fortress will have a net tax of 10 million gold coins by next year. Dina raised her eyebrows slightly as she spoke, and her long eyelashes fluttered. The light in her eyes, coupled with her bright and beautiful expression, made all the men present breathe heavily. Fox hurriedly said, 10 million gold coins. Fox was stunned. 10 million gold coins? Really? Could he have heard wrong? The fortress city's annual tax revenue of hundreds of thousands of gold coins was considered high, and Dina had increased that figure by 100 times. The other officials also had a change in expression. That's right, 10 million gold coins, Dina said resolutely. That is only our first goal. In the next few years, we will increase that figure again, to at least 100 million. Dina looked at their expressions as she spoke, and she felt a little emotional. Seeing those people in front of her was like seeing herself before Watson. If she had not followed Watson and seen the wealth in the Severed Fingers gang, which was even more prosperous than the Holy Dragon Kingdom, she would not have been able to demand 100 million gold coins. Even Veronica, who was in charge of the bank and the underground casino, was worth more than 100 million gold coins. The 100 million gold coins in taxes were just a tiny amount. Watson had asked her to become the planetary fortress first city lord. That was a great courtesy, and she had to meet Watson's expectations. Just 100 million in taxes has shocked those guys. If they knew what young Master Watson had in mind, their jaws would probably drop. Geniuses were different from ordinary people. In the past, she had also claimed to be a genius. It was Watson who had changed her mind. At that moment, seeing the officials' reactions, she could not help but feel a sense of superiority. Many of the people there, even her father, had tried to curry favor with her. They were respectful of her. They were so enthralled by her every move that they could not find their way around. The natural charm that had been useless in front of Watson was once again compelling there. Dina calmed her mind and pulled everyone's attention back. If you have any opinions on my goal, please feel free to voice them. Lady Dina, the goal of getting 10 million gold coins a year is a little grand. We might as well take it slow and put our goal at 1 million gold coins first. As Fox stole a glance at Dina, he continued to say, of course, if Lady Dina insists on achieving that goal, as the former city lord, I can make a little immature suggestion. Quick, hold Lord Fox. Don't let him speak. Seeing that Fox was about to speak and Dina did not react, the officials became anxious. Two of them rushed forward and covered Fox's mouth. When the city taxes were only at 200,000 gold coins, Fox's plan had already caused a lot of losses. Since Dina had set the target at 10 million gold coins, they would lose even more if Fox had any bad ideas. In the past, those officials had to restrain themselves because they were worried about Fox's identity as the city lord. Since he was no longer the city lord, there was no need for them to hide it. Since none of you have any good ideas, let me make a plan for you. In the past, the fortress city's main tax income was to collect tolls from the merchants. It's just that the income is too little. There are no good fields or pastures here. It's also impossible to develop agriculture and animal husbandry. However, we have an advantage. After young Master Watson transformed the fortress city into a planetary fortress, we gained the ability to revolve around the Holy Dragon Kingdom. In a day, we can revolve around the Holy Dragon Kingdom once. That is faster than any caravan's transportation speed. In other words, we can know what is happening in the kingdom before anyone else. We can sell that precious information to the people who need it at a high price. Similarly, the special crops in other regions around the kingdom can't be sent to other places because of shelf life. The congestion in the regions also contributes to the difference in prices. We can adjust the prices of the crops in different regions. If we can do that, it is not impossible to increase the tax revenue to 10 million a year. What do you think? Chapter 564, The House of Everything. After Dina voiced her thoughts, all the officials looked at each other in dismay, and the entire place was silent. After a moment, Fox was the first to snap back to his senses. He clapped his hands loudly, as expected of Lady Dina. That idea is very good. I would like to add 2 points as well. In addition to selling information and crops, we can also use the characteristics of the planetary fortress to turn this city into a tourist attraction. We can invite the kingdom's residents to come here as guests and experience a one-day tour of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. At the same time, we can also levy protection fees on other cities in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. After all, the planetary fortress is the outermost protective layer of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. We have an obligation to protect the kingdom's territory. At the same time, we also have the right to eat. Fox is starting again. All the officials looked troubled after Fox spoke. What surprised them was that Dina did not object after Fox said those words. Instead, she nodded and said, "Your idea is not bad." As expected of someone who has been a city lord, those ideas sound feasible. They can bring huge benefits to the planetary fortress. Fox's idea was actually feasible. Many of the officials were at a loss. Fox was also stunned. Then, a look of ecstasy appeared on his face. "Lady Dina, I still have many ideas that I haven't said out loud. Later, we can discuss it alone." "Sure." Dina nodded. Her words enraged the other officials. They were all fascinated by the charm that Dina exuded. Fox had gotten the chance to be alone with Dina. As a man, how could they not be jealous? Lady Dina, I have an idea too. I think that the planetary fortresses can expand the planetary fortress army. Then, they can be outsourced to other nearby cities to earn fees. I suggest changing the operating speed of the 9 planetary fortresses so that they can operate at different speeds. That way, they can reach different regions of the kingdom at the same time. Not only can we improve patrolling, but we can also collect materials between different regions in a short period of time. The efficiency will be greatly increased. After Fox, the officials raised their ideas one after another. All of them were arguing until their faces turned red. Dina's lips curled slightly. When she first arrived, it was clear that those officials did not pay much attention to their work, especially after experiencing the elves' invasion. There was even fear in the eyes of those officials. They were afraid of making mistakes in their work and taking responsibility, which caused them not to dare speak their mind. It was different then. Under her stimulation, those officials let go of the burden in their hearts. How could a team of officials trying their best to improve the city not make the city develop better? Dina talked with the officials in detail about the future development of the planetary fortress. Soon, it was already noon. She took the officials to a meal. Speaking of food, the fortress city had an excellent specialty food called bracken bread. It is made from bracken mixed with other wild vegetables. The taste is a little bitter, but it can strengthen your body. If you are interested, Lady Dina, we can try it. An official followed closely behind Dina with an exciting recommendation. Another official added, the bracken bread is indeed a special feature of the fortress city, but it's not some high-class food. Lady Dina went to great lengths to come here from the capital, and you're just going to let her eat that? During the conversation just now, many officials took the opportunity to inquire about Dina. They learned that Dina belonged to a declining Earl family in the capital, and she was also a student of the Royal Knight Academy like Watson. Most importantly, Dina was single. Then tell me, where do you want Lady Dina to eat? Because of the elves' invasion, many resources stored in the city were looted. Taverns and the likes were also mostly destroyed. Even if young Master Watson helped to restore the damaged buildings, those taverns would not be able to open in a short period without sufficient ingredients. An official retorted in dissatisfaction. His words left everyone speechless. They wanted to take Dina to eat something good, but they did not have any good places to go. Don't worry, everyone. Follow me. I know a good place to eat. Dina smiled and turned toward the main road. The planetary fortress was utterly different from the previous fortress city. A golden river ran through the city. The streets that extended in all directions were paved with sparkling platinum-colored floors. There were towering palaces all around the streets. The huge crystal dome blocked the sunlight, allowing the sunlight to shine in without being too dazzling. Many people walked down the streets, either laughing and chatting or going to the shops to buy goods. It was a peaceful scene. Without having the time to appreciate the scenery, Dina had brought the officials to a tavern called the Holy Dragon Tavern. The tavern had 3 floors. The outside was a retro courtyard, and the inside was filled with tower-shaped buildings. The sound of flowing water could be faintly heard around the building. Holy Dragon Tavern? What kind of tavern is this? How come I've never heard of it before? An official looked at the tavern before him and fell into deep thought. As an official of the original fortress city, he was very familiar with that city. He knew every street, but he had never heard of that tavern. There was only one explanation for that situation: it was new. It looked like it was built in a day. Was that possible? I seem to have heard of that name somewhere before. Fox rubbed his chin and thought for a moment before his eyes suddenly widened. Wait, I remember now. Isn't the Holy Dragon Tavern the most famous tavern in the capital? I have traveled to the capital and eaten food in that tavern. That's right. This Holy Dragon Tavern is a branch of the main tavern in the capital. Lord Fox had proposed building the planetary fortress into a tourist city. So, the first priority is bringing food and beverages, so I've informed my men to build a Holy Dragon Tavern here." While Dina was explaining to the officials around her with a smile, the Severed Fingers gang members were carrying goods into the tavern. "Everyone, be careful. All those items, such as sunfruit wine and angel wine, are fragile. Don't break them." The leader was a burly man. Suddenly, a member ran toward him. He said in a low voice, "Boss, there's a problem with the building complex. One of the courtyards is built 10 inches away from its original position. What should we do? What else can we do? Tear it down and rebuild it? Do you need me to teach you such a trivial thing?" The burly man rolled his eyes. The member immediately responded respectfully. He spread his combat aura wings and flew into the air. He extended his right hand toward one of the courtyards of the Holy Dragon Tavern and pressed downward. Boom! The ground flashed with a rich earthy yellow light and instantly collapsed. A deep pit that stretched for dozens of meters appeared on the ground. There was no doubt that that attack had the power of a Platinum Tier elite when it shattered the ground with one strike. After shattering the ground, a few Severed Fingers gang members also rose into the air and chanted a spell. Then, they used magic to change the shape of the meteors, transforming them into houses in the courtyard's original location. It took less than a minute to shatter and rebuild a courtyard. That scene stunned all the officials. Those people are so powerful. Are they Platinum Tier elites? It's too extravagant to use Platinum Tier elites to build a house. They finally knew how the Holy Dragon Tavern was built in such a short time. Lady Dina, if I remember correctly, it was less than half an hour ago when we discussed the future development plan in the conference room. How did you inform those people to do that in such a short time? When Fox swallowed his saliva, the shock on his face lasted for a few seconds before it disappeared. That's a great question. They came through the Golden River that runs through the city. The river that young Master Watson created can teleport people. As long as they are around the river, they can instantly reach any places they want to go. I managed to send a message to them via the House of Everything. Dina reached out and pointed at a tower-shaped building that was even bigger than the tavern next to the Holy Dragon Tavern. That is the House of Everything. Before we eat, everyone should go in and take a look. After all, that is the Planetary Fortress' main profitable project in the future. Chapter 565, Nothing You Can't Imagine. Everyone, welcome to the Everything House. A pretty woman in a maid's uniform welcomed Dina and the others with a smile. This is a place created by young Master Watson, dedicated to satisfying the curiosity of the Holy Dragon Kingdom's residents. In this Everything House, no matter what information you want to know, you can get it. There's nothing you can't imagine and nothing you can't get. Isn't that an exaggeration? The officials did not believe what the maid had said. Some of them looked confused. If you don't believe me, I can verify it. What do you want to know? There will be a special discount on your first order. No fee is needed. Let me try. When the Elven army captured the city a few days ago, I lost a sword in my house. That sword is my family heirloom. I wonder where it is now and if the elves have damaged it. One of the noblemen who looked doubtful spoke first. Please wait a moment. I have already passed your question to the archive manager. If you wait patiently for a few minutes, we will get the results. The maid smiled and pointed behind her. A crack immediately appeared on the wall. Then, everyone noticed a spiral staircase behind the crack, leading to an unknown high altitude. There were also bookshelves on the spiral stairs. They were filled with all kinds of information. When everyone first entered the house, they felt as if the house was not as big as it had looked from the outside. Then, it seemed bigger than they had imagined, but most of the area was occupied by those books. Roar! While everyone was sighing over the house's structure, a roar pulled their attention back. They saw a thick and long black tentacle hanging from the spiral-shaped sky. It was covered with half-opened scarlet eyes. As it rotated, evil power spread outward. Everyone felt fear in their hearts. What is that thing? That is the magical beast that protects the everything house. Its name is the Old Dominator. It is an evil divine creature from ancient times. Its strength is comparable to that of a god. However, it is also very docile. It will not take the initiative to harm you. The everything house has a lot of information stored in it. If we were to search for that information one by one, it would take a lot of time. The Old Dominator has many eyes. Its gaze also has a penetrating effect. It can solve any problem quickly. The maid explained the situation to everyone. Watson was in charge of the everything house, including its staffing. The first was the Old Dominator. That was a copy of the ancient evil god that Watson had created using the Book of Wisdom, a peak starlight tier artifact. It could help the everything house search for information quickly, and it could also act as a fighting force should the need arise. Other than that, the large amount of information stored in the everything house, which involved the history of humankind, was filled in by Watson using the human chess pieces. After all, the human chess pieces recorded the entire history of humanity. The rest of the information was obtained through the painstaking efforts of Elvin and the Severed Fingers members, who had gone to various parts of the Holy Dragon Kingdom to gather information. I see. Many officials patted their chests and heaved a sigh of relief. Since the appearance of the Golden River in the city, many of those who had not trained were upgraded to Gold Tier. They knew that the soldiers who had joined the Planetary Fortress Army had been promoted to Diamond Tier, and they also had the opportunity to be promoted in the future. However, they were still apprehensive of any powerful existence at Starlight Tier. At the same time, they sighed in their hearts. It was as they had expected of Watson. It was always something unexpected. Lady, you haven't answered my question yet. A moment later, the noble who had just asked the question recovered from his shock. Please don't be anxious. I will read the information you need right now. The maid clapped her hands. The black tentacles hanging down from the cracks in the wall flipped over and placed an illusory text formed from a magic book into the girl's hand. The girl took a look at it and cleared her throat to read it. Sir, the family heirloom sword that you lost, is it called the Lion King's sword? Is it a Gold Tier peak weapon? The elves did not take that weapon. Instead, your wife sold it to a black market merchant at a high price. The reason was that she wanted to buy a huge manor in the city to support her lover. My wife? That's impossible. My wife loves me very much. There's no way she would sell our family heirloom to buy a manor, let alone privately meet her lover. The noble official's expression changed drastically. The omniscient house is only responsible for reading the information. Our information is always accurate. If you don't believe me, why don't you go and verify it yourself? The address of the manor is at Planetary Fortress No. 1, Sun Avenue, XXX. Right now, your wife should be with her lover. As the young lady spoke, the noble official gritted his teeth and turned around to rush out of the everything house. If Dina were not there, he would wave his sleeves and leave. After hearing what the young lady said, he was furious. Of course, he could not do that then. He had to verify the information. If it were fake, he would deal with Dean then. After all, that news made him lose his reputation. In less than half an hour, that noble ran back to the everything house. A sword inlaid with 7 gemstones was in his hand, and on the hilt was a lion's head. The man's clothes were also much messy. There was a scratch on his face. Lady, you are absolutely right. My wife did use my heirloom to buy a long sword and has befriended more than one lover. I didn't expect she would do this when I treated her so well and served her every day. She actually betrayed me. Now that I've gotten my heirloom sword back, I've also divorced her. Thank you. Otherwise, I would still be kept in the dark. The noble rushed in and apologized to the maid excitedly. When he realized that everyone around him, including Dina, was looking at him strangely, he coughed and restrained his overly excited expression. My lady, I wonder if you have any more information about me. Can I have a look? I'm sorry, Sir. The first piece of information was for free just now. If you need any more information now, I'll have to charge you. How much? Different information has different prices. The price for what you're asking is 1,000 gold coins per piece. I'll use this sword as collateral. Give me 10 pieces first. The nobleman waved his hand and placed the treasured sword on the table. There were 7 gemstones embedded in the treasured sword, and each of them was a priceless antique. Each of them was worth no less than 1,000 gold coins. In addition, the blade had been passed down since the founding of the kingdom, so its value was not exaggerated. To find more information about him, the nobleman did not even want his family heirloom anymore. What was a family heirloom? He did not know who was plotting against him, so he had no use for that heirloom. It was better to exchange it for precious information. He wanted to see what else he did not know besides his wife cuckolding him. Chapter 566, My name is Lust. Thank you for the payment. After the appraisal, the value of that sword should be around 11,000 gold coins. The Everything House doesn't cheat, so I'll give you an additional piece of information. The young girl took the sword from the official and casually sized it up before casually throwing it behind her. The old dominator's huge tentacles hanging from the cracks in the wall swept it away. Let's talk about that additional piece of information first. There is an officer who has a good relationship with your wife. He is a clerk working in the city hall. His name is... Before the young girl could finish her sentence, the nobleman had already turned his gaze to the right. On his right stood a burly man with a handsome face. His hair was neatly combed to the back of his head, and he looked very energetic. At that moment, the slightly handsome nobleman's face was pale, and cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. There's only one clerk in the city hall here. You dare to touch my wife? I'll kill you. The nobleman was like an enraged lion, ready to kill. However, he discovered that the long sword in his hand had already been handed to the Everything House. Helpless, he could only change his method. It doesn't matter if I don't have a sword. I'll strangle you to death. You can't blame me. It was your wife who seduced me. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame her. I'm warning you, don't come over arg. Before the clerk could finish his words, he was viciously punched by the nobleman who had rushed in front of him. He was not willing to be outdone. He turned around and started beating up the nobleman. During the fight, the young lady from the Everything House read the following 10 pieces of information about the nobleman. It mentioned that only one of the nobleman's children was his own. Several of his colleagues had spread nasty rumors outside, forcing the nobleman to be removed from his position. The nobleman was also in the assassin group's pocket. After those pieces of information appeared, the expressions of many of the officials darkened. It was normal for officials to resort to unscrupulous means to get a higher position in the officialdom. They could even hire assassins to ensure their promotion. Some of them did exactly that. Initially, they thought they had done things in secret and would never be exposed. It seemed like the young maid had revealed their secrets. That mysterious young girl was clearly not someone from the fortress city. How did she know what had happened to them? Good for you. You usually look like a dog, but in the end, you're still not a good person. The nobleman stopped beating the clerk. He was fat and short, and he was not a match for the robust clerk. There were 2 dark circles under his eyes, which made him look especially funny. The officials looked more and more unsightly. Someone snorted coldly and said, "We did some disgraceful things to get to the top, but what about you? Are you very honorable? I'm willing to pay 10,000 gold coins. I want to know all the dirt about you." The payment is successful. Next is the information about all the bad things this nobleman had done. The maid smiled and waved her hand. She took another stack of illusory books and began to read them. The evil deeds that this gentleman has done include colluding with the city guards, intentionally demanding a high penalty for breach of contract when certain merchant caravans pass by. Previously, when the fortress city was carrying out the hot spring renovation project, he embezzled a sum of money, causing the excavation to be unprotected. The workers dug the city's sewers to be damaged, and I was wondering why the water was stinky, so it was all your fault. If it weren't for you, even if the water pool wasn't a hot spring, it could at least be transformed into a pond to breed some magical aquatic beasts. When the girl read out the information, Fox could not help but speak angrily. Back then, he was humiliated because of the failure of the hot spring project. Thanks to the help of those officials, the economy did not suffer too much. At that time, he was very grateful to those people, but it seemed like those people were the main culprits that caused the failure of the hot spring project. No wonder they helped him. It turned out that he had always been the sucker. It's not like that. Please listen to me. The nobleman looked flustered. He waved his hand to explain. Unfortunately, his explanation was too weak, and no one believed him. I have already said too much about the crimes that the nobleman has committed. Next is the most important one. Enough, stop talking. That nobleman has been having an improper relationship with the wife of the city's clerk. What? The clerk widened his eyes in disbelief. I'm so much better than you, how could my wife? You're not bad looking, but I'm richer than you. How do you think you got that position as a clerk? The nobleman explained guiltily, it's all because of your wife that I managed to get you that position. You slept with my wife, and I slept with yours. We're even now. We're even, my *SS. I'll beat you to death. The clerk roared and turned into an angry tiger. He pounced on the nobleman and rode on him. He punched him again and again with his left fist. Boss, give me a copy of that information. I want one too. I want 3 copies. The other officials could not help but bid to buy the information. They were also worried that they would be cuckolded or schemed against by villains. In a short period, dozens of officials had bought hundreds of pieces of information and paid a total of 100,000 gold coins. It was chaotic. The officials were entangled in 2s and 3s and were beating each other. They were criticizing each other for all kinds of crimes. The lives of those officials are too messy. Not only are their private lives messy, even their methods of getting to the top are disgusting. Dina took a few steps backward and stood next to the maid. Yes, there aren't many good people here. They have power, so they don't treat ordinary people as human beings. They are wealthy, but they are even more greedy than the poor, and they are trying all kinds of ways to exploit others. But now, the evil things they've done have been exposed. In the future, if they want to do similar things, they would have to think twice about it. Young Master Watson set up the Everything House to earn money from the nobleman and get the nobleman back on the right track. It was to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. There was a hint of respect in her tone. The maidservant maintained a smile on her face. That smile was different from the professional smile just now, and it was entirely from the bottom of her heart. The Everything House was not only the Holy Dragon Kingdom's intelligence network. It was also an oversight agency. After learning that the Everything House could obtain information about everyone, those officials would have to worry about whether they would be discovered if they wanted to do anything that violated the laws of the kingdom. Dina brought those officials there to help them understand the functions of the Everything House. On the other hand, she wanted them to understand Everything House's power and be a person who followed the rules in the future. My name is Dina, the heir of a poor earl's family in the royal city. May I know your name as young Master Watson's subordinate? Dina stretched out her right hand. She noticed that some of the information had incited the nobleman's fury. However, they did not kill each other. It was not an easy thing to do to control one's emotions. I am a member of the former Demonis bandit gang. I have forgotten my name since I have not used it for a long time. You can just call me by my title. I am Lust. I am now a maid on Mount Creation and the boss of the planetary fortress Everything House. The girl also reached out and gently held Dina's hand. Chapter 567, Refusing to Admit Defeat. Dina should be leading the officials in the city to visit the Everything House now. After that, those officials should understand their situation and work hard for me. Fortunately, even though many of those officials have made mistakes, they are not unforgivable. Otherwise, even if the planetary fortress is short of manpower, I would not place them in any important position. Watson was standing at the top of a palace in the planetary fortress. Beside him stood a beautiful, expressionless girl in a long black dress. The girl had a pair of pure white wings on her back. The girl said, "My honorable master, everything has happened as you wished. Just now, I captured dozens of elven assassins around the planetary fortress. Those assassins are platinum tier elites, and their bodies contain the bloodlines of mythical creatures. According to my speculation, they should have used the power of the elven race chess pieces. Some managed to escape and are hiding in the city." The girl was Nia. After Watson had dealt with the leader of the elves, Beta, he used the Dragon Palace network to send the sea folks back to the royal city to pass the information to Nia. "I'm sorry, Nia. I called you here when you were still in class at the Royal Academy." Watson turned around, and an apologetic expression appeared on his face. Nia hurriedly shook her head. "Master, don't say that. It's my honor to be able to work by my master's side. This is much more important than attending classes. After all, I won't be able to learn much at the Royal Academy anyway with my current strength. Besides, didn't you also summon many of your subordinates from the border? I'm relieved to hear that. I knew that the elven assassins had infiltrated the planetary fortress. However, I didn't have the time to do anything about it as I had to deal with Beta. Now that the elven assassins have disappeared, I suspect that someone in the city has helped them. We've just built the planetary fortress, we shouldn't have any spies here. So, I want you to find this spy. What happens after I find him? Do you want to kill him? No, bring him to me after you find him. I have my own plans for him." Watson's eyes flashed as he spoke. Nia nodded and did not ask any more questions. "I understand." As soon as he finished speaking, Nia spread the angel wings on her back and turned into a streak of light, disappearing into the sky. "Nia is stronger than me. She shouldn't have any problem doing that. I have a rough guess on who is protecting the elves. I hope I am wrong. Otherwise." At a hotel in the planetary fortress. "Lady Delta, we are the only ones left among the assassins who sneaked into that city." Delta looked at the few elves in front of her with an unsightly expression. When they set off, there were more than 100 of them. At that moment, there were 10. Those elves were injured, and their faces had darkened. It was obvious that their combat strength was not at its peak. "Human King, didn't you promise that you would have a way to let my compatriots enter the city safely? How did things turn out like this?" Delta gritted her teeth and turned around to ask the indifferent-looking King Landhar III, who was standing beside her. While King Landhar III had discovered them while they were sneaking into the city, they had witnessed Watson's heaven-defying strength. They had no choice but to work with King Landhar III to deal with Watson. After that, King Landhar III claimed that he could get them outside the city and send them out of the planetary fortress. "If you have time to blame me, why don't you think about what to do now? I didn't expect Watson to ambush them outside the planetary fortress. Initially, I planned to take advantage of the recent recruitment of troops in the planetary fortress to disguise you as humans to get accepted in the selection and leave here as part of the army. Since that will not work, I will escort you out of the planetary fortress. As for what you will do after that, it's up to you." When King Landhar III said that, Delta's expression darkened. She wanted to curse King Landhar III for being a scammer, but it seemed like there was no better way at the moment. After watching Watson kill Beta, she understood how powerful the young man was. However, the other elves did not understand that. Some elves snorted coldly after hearing what King Landhar III said. "Human King, You mean to say after that we got here with great difficulty, we have to leave with our tails between our legs? We did all this for nothing? Even if we can't kill Watson, we are now in a human city. At least we have to do something before we leave. Aren't you afraid of being discovered? Indeed, we were ambushed outside the planetary fortress. The woman with angelic wings who ambushed us is very powerful. Even if we have the mythical creature's power to help us, we are still no match for her. However, don't we have your help? As long as you can hide our tracks, we are not afraid of that woman. I wonder what agreement Lady Delta has made with you. If you can't help us escape, at least help us hide for a while. Can't you even do such a small thing? The elf who questioned King Landhar III was semi-transparent. There was no blood under his semi-transparent skin. Instead, it was filled with liquid. When he spoke, the skin on the surface of his body shook slightly, and bubbles could be seen rising from below. That elf evolved after being exposed to the chess piece's power. He was transformed into an ancient mythical creature, the water demon. He could turn his entire body into a colorless and tasteless liquid like water. He could blend into the surface of the water and kill without being seen. Similarly, he could use his body to create a clone that had half the ability of the original body. The original body and the clone could be exchanged. Even if his body was damaged, as long as there was still some bodily fluid left, he could be regenerated. Young elf, of course, I can hide you for a longer period. You said that you wanted to do some things in the city before leaving. I wonder what you want to do in the city. A cold light flashed in King Landhar II's eyes, but on the surface, he remained unmoved. The corners of the young elf's mouth rose, and a vicious expression appeared on his face. So many of us died outside the planetary fortress. If we don't complete our mission and return, His Majesty, the Elven King, will punish us. No matter what, we must let the humans in that city taste the same pain as us. I heard that there is a river that runs through the entire city. I'll use my power to plant my clone in that river. If the residents in the city drink the water, they will die in pain. The mythical creature that I evolved into is an ancient poisonous thorn. My body can transform into a poisonous vine. I can help poison the water. My ability is invisibility. I can use that to kill some of the higher UPS in the city discreetly. After the young elf, a few elf assassins spoke up excitedly. Water was the source of all life. As long as they poisoned the water in the city, the inhabitants of the planetary fortress would die when they drank it. They had another purpose besides killing Watson, which was to investigate how the people of the planetary fortress were doing. Previously, the people of the planetary fortress had been poisoned by the Elven King with the marionette poison. After they entered the city, they learned that the residents had been cured of the poison. That proved that there were people in the city who were good at detoxification. So, the elves could not just poison them, they had to make sure that those people were killed. Chapter 568, Disinfecting the River. How foolish! After listening to the elven assassin's discussion, King Landhar III cursed in his heart. The way he looked at the elves in front of him was equivalent to looking at a dead person. He had kindly persuaded the elves to leave because he did not want them to die in vain. Since those elves were seeking death, he did not care. Anyway, he only needed one elf to survive and return to the Elven Kingdom to inform their king. I can understand how you feel. Since you want to complete those tasks so badly, I will help you. However, I also have one condition. If you fail, there is no way for you to escape. I need you to split into two teams. One group will leave the planetary fortress, and the other group will carry out the mission. What do you think? No problem. The elves, led by Delta, looked at each other and agreed. Whoever wants to leave the planetary fortress, come to my side. I'm preparing to leave the city. As Delta spoke, only a few elves walked to her side, the remaining elves were unmoved. Their eyes were unwavering, obviously intending to complete the mission. Well, that's done. Everyone can take action now. Those who have chosen to assassinate the residents, may the gods bless you. King Landhar III stretched out his hand and made a gesture. Then, he pulled the hood of his cloak and covered his head. He turned around and escorted Delta and the others, who had chosen to leave, leaving behind a few elves who had entered. King Landhar III curled his lips in disdain. As the king of the Holy Dragon Kingdom, he didn't arrest us, and he even joined forces with us to deal with a genius from his kingdom. He didn't even care about the safety of his people. He is so hypocritical that it is disgusting. I don't know why Lady Delta chose to believe that human king. Lady Delta has awakened the power of the Phoenix. Even if she is not as powerful as Beta, she is still extremely powerful. If we attack together, we can kill Watson. Forget it. Since Lady Delta has chosen to leave us, it's useless to complain here. Let's use our actions to prove that her choice was wrong. The few of us are enough to destroy the people in this city. After the remaining elves complained a few more times, they scattered and flew from the planetary fortress in different directions. On the bank of the Golden River in the planetary fortress, one by one, the residents on the river bank chanted a prayer silently in front of a priest dressed in church attire. Thank you, young Master Watson, the Holy Dragon Kingdom's guardian. It was you who dispersed the war and gave us this rich river water. We will pray to you every day before meals and sing your true name. May you grant us courage and strength. The residents chanting the prayers were men, women, and children, old and young. All of them had devout expressions on their faces. When they were chanting the prayers, the illusory light of the power of faith appeared on their bodies. The power of faith was like a thread that entered the void and connected to Watson's body. Not long after that, waves of vast knowledge descended on every resident, causing them to close their eyes and savor it subconsciously. Not far away from those praying citizens, a pair of eyes floated on the surface of the water, coldly watching everything. There was not a trace of emotion in those eyes. It was one of the elves who was preparing to assassinate those people. He had the bloodline of the water demon race. Praying to an ordinary youth who is not a god and treating him as a god. Humans are really ignorant. Forget it. Those ignorant fellows are going to die soon. I'll let them experience my powerful strength. Ridicule rose in his heart. The elf's body had completely merged with the Golden River. Soon, clones split off his body and turned into the smallest water molecules that surged in the direction of the river. They covered the entire river. At that moment, the priest stood up from the shore. He took a silver bowl from his bosom and scooped a bowl of water from the Golden River, saying, "Next, let us use the river water that contains divine power to continue praying to the great young Master Watson." The believers took containers and scooped some water from the Golden River into the containers. Drinking the Golden River water was one of the methods set up by the church in the planetary fortress. The elves had that information, and they were prepared to ambush those believers. After drinking the water that contains my clones, those believers will explode with one single thought. I believe it would cause a huge disturbance in the city. Those so-called believers would question their faith in Watson. Thinking of what would happen after those believers died, the elven assassin felt excited. He watched nervously as the believers drank water that contained a part of his body without any hesitation. He could feel it when the water washed down the throats of every believer. However, in the next moment, the feeling disappeared. Why does the river water taste weird today? It doesn't taste as good as before. A believer held an empty bowl and rubbed his stomach as if he was not feeling very well. It is indeed a little strange, but young Master Watson said that the river water hasn't been treated by high temperature, and it contains a large number of bacteria and microorganisms. It's easy to get sick if you drink it. Before drinking it, it is best to heat it or use the power in your body to destroy the microorganisms contained in it. Thanks to the power of death element that young Master Watson has given us, we do not need to heat it to grant those viruses death. Another believer spoke up. The other believers around him also began to discuss it. I wonder where young Master Watson got so much strange knowledge at such a young age. Young Master Watson is the reincarnation of a god. That must be knowledge only possessed by a god. After listening to young Master Watson's suggestion, I feel like my body has become much stronger. Even my child, who has always been ill, is getting better. Many believers sighed as they turned around and walked out of the river bank. That made the elven assassin hiding in the river a little confused. The clones he used had lost their effect. How could that be? He was a platinum tier elite. The believers in front of him looked like they were only gold tier elites. How did they dodge his attack? Forget it. Those believers might have escaped by luck. As long as I attack them head-on, they will still die. The elven assassin stood up from the riverbank with a splash of water, revealing his utterly transparent body. In his right hand, a long spear formed from water currents followed, and before he could throw the weapon in his hand in the direction of the riverbank, a few believers who had left suddenly returned. It's too troublesome to use the power of death to kill the poison in the bowl of water every time I pray. I might as well directly kill the poison in the river. As soon as they finished speaking, black air currents appeared in the hands of the believers. Then, the believers threw those currents into the water surface. Those black air currents were the power of death, and they managed to kill all the plankton in the water. The river became even clearer after that. No. The elven assassin also died. He even watched as the power of death invaded his body. He did not have the chance to use the spring of life to revive himself. He collapsed into a pool of sparkling water and disappeared into the water. Chapter 569, Not Resting in Peace. It's done. Let's go. The believers who had released the power of death had no idea that they had killed an elven assassin. They turned around and left. A pale being with white feathered wings floated in the air in the sky, freezing the space into a crystal-clear ice block. Nia flapped her wings and watched the scene in front of her quietly. The corners of her mouth twitched. In her hand was a half-torn, blood-red thorn. That was the elven assassin she had found while searching on the river bank. The assassin was about to poison the river bank at that time, but she had successfully intercepted and killed him. I had wanted to kill that assassin, but I didn't expect that the residents would be able to kill the assassin on their own without my help. That is all thanks to the death element that my esteemed master restored recently. Originally, that power was exclusive to the god of death's descendants in ancient times, but now it has become one of the human's abilities. Master is as powerful as I imagined, Nia muttered to herself. After she discovered that Watson had the fusion system, she did not choose to snatch it like the other gods. Instead, she decided to follow Watson. Her body had already recovered to the strength of a platinum tier angel because she had chosen Watson. She could unleash a power that was no weaker than that of a god. At the same time, she had also obtained many additional abilities from Watson. One of them was the power of death. That was why she could kill the elven assassin that had infiltrated the city. In the past, humans were a relatively small race in the world. The tree spirit seed was also one of them. The tree spirit seed relied on water from the spring of life and evolution. The former had many methods that could be broken through, while the latter had many drawbacks. That caused the tree spirit seed to hide near the forest of eternity after the Great War. As for now, due to the war, many races have been exterminated. Humans have used their reproductive ability to occupy this world. It seems like humans are the strongest. With Master's help, the human race will only become stronger and stronger. After lamenting for a while, Nia's ears twitched. She looked at the city hall officials' area, not far away from the river bank. I sense the aura of an assassin again. It looks like I don't need to make a move at this time either. The room where a particular city hall official was staying was filled with intense arguments. Divorce. No matter what you say today, we are going to get a divorce. I didn't expect you to sleep with another man behind my back. If I didn't go to the everything house and spend money to buy information, I would not even know about it. Gerald, the city hall clerk, was in that room. At that moment, he was burning with anger. He was scolding his wife, who was wearing light muslin pajamas in front of him. His beautiful wife also looked furious. "Gerald, think about it. Why did I sleep with that fat official? It was all for you. If it weren't to get you that clerical position, why would I do such a thing? Do you think I like him?" His wife's words made Gerald's face freeze. Then, he coughed awkwardly, "It doesn't matter. You slept with another man. I can rely on my own efforts to become a clerk, I don't need you to do that. If you do such a thing again, we can only get a divorce if you..." Before he could finish his sentence, the woman in front of him smiled bitterly and took out a dagger from her waist. "There's nothing else I can do. I love you. I'd rather die than get a divorce. This dagger is a platinum-tier weapon His Highness Watson brought from the royal city. I had wanted to give it to you as a birthday present, but now it seems like I will get to use it." As she spoke, the woman took a small bottle containing a dark green poison from her body. "This poison is also a platinum-tier poison that the sea folks brought from the royal city. I bought it to use on that fat official one day, but now..." Tears streamed down the woman's face. She opened the bottle and carefully poured the poison on the blade, stabbing it against her neck. The blade swung in the air, pausing for a moment as if it had stabbed something else. The strong obstruction stunned the woman. She stared blankly at the blade suspended half a meter in front of her neck. Before she could react, Gerald suddenly rushed in front of her and knocked the blade aside. "I'm sorry, my dear Lisa. I didn't expect you to love me so much that you'd be willing to die for me. I want to take back what I said just now. I don't want to divorce you. I will choose to forget what you did. Let's start again." Gerald hugged his wife tightly. When his wife was about to commit suicide, he realized how much he loved the woman in front of him. "That's great, Gerald. Thank you for understanding." Lisa nodded and hugged Gerald. At that time, she noticed that there were still some remnants of the poison in her hands. She hesitated and said, "This poison. We don't need it anymore, right?" Gerald took the poison from his wife and threw it behind him. A faint scream sounded in the air. "What? Gerald, did you hear something?" Lisa frowned and raised her eyebrows suspiciously. "I didn't hear anything. It's nothing." Gerald reached into Lisa's pajamas and began to take off her clothes. Before she could say anything else, Gerald covered Lisa's mouth and carried her to the bed. Not long after that, the two of them started panting. An elven assassin was lying on the ground in a place that they could not see. His body was made of wind. A long and thin wound was on his throat, and blood was gushing out of it. There was a poison bottle that Gerard had casually thrown away on top of his wound. The poison entered his body through his throat, making him grab his throat tightly with both hands. He could only make a few syllables with difficulty. How could this be? He had sneaked into that residence because the interior was well decorated. The master of the house must have quite a high status in the city. If he could kill him, it would definitely cause panic in the city. It was a good idea. Unfortunately, he saw the two people arguing not long after entering the house. He had wanted to sneak toward the woman and slit her throat to admire Gerald's terrified look. Who would have thought that he would be the one stabbed and poisoned just before he reached the woman? That elf had evolved into the storm race. That was a pure elemental race in ancient times. The creatures of the storm race looked like a giant storm that could move freely because their bodies were made of flowing wind. They were difficult to capture and even harder to see. Ordinary physical attacks were ineffective against them. The dagger that had stabbed him was not an ordinary platinum-tier weapon. It was enchanted with platinum-tier wind suppression magic, freezing his wind-like body when he was hit. He could have used the spring of life to resurrect. However, the poison that Gerald threw immediately thwarted his ability to resurrect himself. The poison that Lisa bought came from the Abeder family, who had earned a large amount of money because they had helped Watson sell the blessings of the gods and demons. The supply of that potion was still in short supply. "Robin, who could not become the head of the family, could only increase production. Unfortunately, the other members of the Abedar family did not have as much talent as Rose. Their potions had failed quite frequently, and among the failed products was a powerful poison that could kill a platinum tier elite with a single drop. However, the dead could maintain their youth forever, and their corpses would not rot. It was known as the Sleeping Beauty poison. The Sleeping Beauty poison was sold for 1,000th of the original price for the blessings of the gods and demons. It was used to preserve beautiful specimens that had died so that they would not rot. Since the Sleeping Beauty poison originated from the residue of blessings of the gods and demons, which was made from the spring of life, the poison contained the characteristics of the spring of life. Since it could cause a creature's bodily functions to fail permanently, the spring of life in that elven assassin's body was coincidentally restrained by that poison. Even though he had evolved into a platinum tier creature, he still tried to ambush his prey. Unfortunately, he was killed by the two weak humans instead. That dramatic twist would make the elven assassin unable to rest in peace, even in death. Chapter 570, Fusing King Landhar 3. Outside the planetary fortress. The planetary fortress goes around the Holy Dragon Kingdom once every day, and there are 9 similar planetary fortresses, each of which goes around the city at a different speed. That means that if you want to get out, you have to avoid those planetary fortresses that appear at different times. These are the operational diagrams of the 9 planetary fortresses that I've drawn over the past 2 days through observation, including the specific structure of each of the planetary fortresses. With this diagram, you should be able to avoid the army's surveillance. King Landhar III took out 9 diagrams from his robes and handed them to Delta. Delta did not thank him after receiving the diagrams. Instead, she asked cautiously, "Then, how do we break through the starlight barrier? Other than Beta, none of us can break the 9 gigantic starlight barriers outside." That might not be the case. If I remember correctly, the Elven race chess pieces allow you to evolve without limits. Your current evolution level is still somewhat reserved. If you break the limits and don't control your evolution, I believe that you will have a way to break the starlight barrier. I will recommend a few places here. Do not go to the north or the south. Other than that, you can go anywhere and break the starlight barrier without causing too much of a reaction in a short period. King Landhar III's profound words made the elves' faces darken. Just as King Landhar III had said, if they chose not to control the speed of their evolution, there was a way to break the barrier if they continued to evolve without limit. However, it would be very difficult for them to return to their form before their last evolution. They might even lose their lives because of that, just like Beta. Their lives might be lost in vain. Even if they were professional assassins, they would not be able to make such a decision. King Landhar III chuckled when he saw their hesitation. He took a container-like object from his bosom and handed it to Delta. The container had a pitch-black viscous liquid in it. The viscous liquid did not roll around, it was as if it had a life of its own. The black, viscous liquid also emitted an evil aura. That aura was very similar to God's remains, but it was also slightly different. One could vaguely see some half-opened eyes and black threads that looked like seaweed in the black, viscous liquid. "What is that?" Delta frowned, apparently quite disgusted with the thing in front of her. "This is a tool that stores the power of a starlight tier elite. It can let you leave the starlight barrier safely. If you don't want to use your evolved form, you can use this thing." After he handed the transparent container to Delta and the others, King Landhar III turned around and walked into the planetary fortress. "Can that thing be trusted?" An elf looked at the item in Delta's hand and asked, "Will there be any danger if we hold that thing in our hands?" "I don't know. It doesn't look good on the surface. If it really is such a precious item that contains the power of a starlight tier elite, will the human king give it to us for free? I'll try that later. If it can break through the starlight barrier, we'll be able to get out. If it doesn't work, we'll throw it away, remove our evolutionary limit, and then get out that way." As she made up her mind, Delta carefully put away the thing in her hand. She spread the flaming phoenix wings on her back and flew out with the elves beside her. Not long after they left, the space where they were standing suddenly fluctuated. Faint feathers appeared and condensed in the space. Nia, who was wearing a long black dress, fluttered her pure white wings and looked at the long distance in front of her. She looked at an unknown place. All the elven assassins in the city have been captured or killed. Now, only the few who escaped are left. The white wings on her back flapped gently. Just as Nia was about to take a step and chase after them, a dignified voice suddenly came from below her. Nia, wait! Your Majesty! Nia turned her head and saw a man in a black robe emerge from the shadows. He pulled the hood on his head and revealed the face of King Landhar III. I did not expect you to be here. Watson must have called for you. Why are you in such a hurry? Your Majesty should know my purpose well, Nia replied expressionlessly. One of her legs had already stepped into the void. It's been a long time. I wonder if the head of the Saint Laurent family is in good health. We should catch up later. Your Majesty, are you trying to stall for time? It's no use. I've already placed feathers on those elves who slipped through my fingers. I can find them no matter where far they are. Oh? If you hadn't prepared ahead of time, you wouldn't have been able to mark those elves, King Landhar III said. It seems like you already know what I've done. When did you start to eavesdrop on me? Probably when His Majesty planned the escape route for the elven assassins. It seems like I've made a mistake. Since you've seen through me, there's nothing else I can say. You should go after those elves. I'll head back first. As he spoke, King Landhar III took a step backward. At that moment, they heard the voice of a young boy from the sky again. You can't leave. It was Watson. When he landed, he stood beside Nia and glanced at her. Nia immediately understood what he meant and flapped her wings to chase after the escaping elves. Meanwhile, Watson turned to face King Landhar III. Your Majesty, I knew you would not give up after you lost to me. However, I did not expect you to collude with the elves and let their assassins try to kill you in the city. Do you know how many people in the planetary fortress would have died for nothing? What does the life and death of the city's residents have to do with me? King Landhar III's expression changed several times, from the initial gloominess to ruthlessness. It looks like I don't need to put on an act anymore. I want your power. So what if I have to sacrifice a city or even the entire Holy Dragon Kingdom for it? Well, my plan was almost successful. As long as I unite with the elves and the Winter Nation, I will have a way to kill you. Now that the information has been spread, I'm just one step away from my victory. King Landhar III gritted his teeth, looking very dejected. For the sake of Queen Avril, you've crossed the line. I can only say that I'm sorry. You will suffer a punishment worse than death. What punishment? To use your terrifying fusing ability on me? You want to fuse me into your slave? I am the kingdom's ruler. I would rather die than let you succeed. King Landhar III's eyes widened, and a hint of cruelty appeared in his eyes. He reached out with his right hand and stabbed his throat. Time, stop. Watson spoke slowly. With him as the center, everything within the radius of several kilometers, including the moving planetary fortress, was frozen. A wheel of light emitting the aura of time appeared behind him. The wheel of reversal could control time. As time stopped, King Landhar III also maintained the posture of stabbing his throat and fell into a state of stillness. Fusion system, activate.